Happy summer, students. I am making this video with the hopes to maybe help some of you. There are about 6 students who turned in their papers in advance, and while I can't guarantee that I'll be able to peruse through all of the first 500 to 1,000 words of everybody, I was able to peruse through those 5 or 6, and I am seeing a common mistake, and I want to try and help those that have already made that mistake see it in their paper so that they can kind of go back and fix that, and also B, for those of you who may be waiting until the midnight fuel of the 30th, that maybe you can not make that mistake going forward. So the really important thing that I see happening is that in the beginning of the papers that we have, that you're not looking at the rubric. Remember that this is criterion-based grading, so it's just got to be what the rubric is calling for. It's unlike anything that you've ever written before. Most of the 6 papers are very report-like at this moment. Remember that it's essential. This paper is an argument. You are not just reporting your research to me. You have to build an argument about your research question. So let's take a look at the criterion. Most of you at this point, what you will be working on within this 500 to 1,000 words is strictly kind of in criterion A, focus and method. So if we look at this, let's break it down, okay? And so this rubric is in your folder that I gave you guys, but I also went ahead and put it in all of your manage box. So if you go to your EE where your RQ is, you'll see all your documents that you uploaded. I actually uploaded it into your documents, each and every single one of your accounts. So you can see this document. So criterion A is strictly on focus and method. Okay, so one, we need to know what that is. So this criterion focuses on the topic, the research question, and the methodology. It assesses the explanation of the focus of the research. This includes the topic and the RQ, how the research will be undertaken, and how the focus is maintained throughout the essay. So in this document right here, unpacking the criterion, so what does all of that mean? So we can see right here that we have put some questions in there. The topic is chosen as identified and explained to readers in terms of contextualizing and justifying its worthiness. How well does the research paper identify and communicate the chosen topic? So one, I think I've only seen 1 of the 6 where you actually have the research question in the introduction. So you must have the research question in the introduction. And then you're going to talk about contextualization. So that's where you're building some information about it and you're justifying why it is worthy. Remember that we have a document that has some help tools in your folder that tell you why or what are some good ideas for worthiness of investigation. It shouldn't just be because I'm interested in it or because I'm passionate about it. You've got to find something more than that to justify your worthiness. Then the purpose and focus of the research to be addressed is within the scope of a 4,000-word essay is outlined in the introduction and specified as a research question. So is the research question appropriate given the scope of the task? So many of you still, your RQs from what I'm seeing in ManageBook are way too broad. It's got to be that very narrowed and focused RQ. Is the research question clearly stated, focused, and based on a situated against background knowledge and understanding of the chosen subject topic area? So in the introduction, you should, after you kind of get through some of the preliminary stuff, in your first couple of paragraphs, you should start building that context and you should start showing your background knowledge on the topic to build towards that argument. Is the focus of the research question maintained throughout the essay? So this is kind of an overall one. They're not neat criterion that are all packed like this is all just in the introduction for criterion A, but most of it is. So you have to kind of read it. The research is planned and appropriate methods of data collection are chosen and identified in order to address the research question. So this is where you're going to actually like tell me your methodology. How are you going to go about proving this research question? Is there evidence of effective and informed source method selection with regard to the choice of appropriate sources and or methods used to gather information, including narrowing of scope, range of sources, methods, in order to address the research question within the constraints of the word limit? Sources, methods are considered relevant, appropriate, and sufficient insofar as the academic standards for the discipline are concerned. For example, for an economics essay, it would not be sufficient to only use textbooks, but rather include reports and data. There is no consideration of research question as such. So then if we go in here, okay, and I just went to IB training for the extended essay, and one of the things that we did is we graded a paper. And so when we grade the paper, we start right here at this highest descriptor, okay? You can ignore these numbers right here to the side. And we're just going to look at this description. So I know what you're thinking, which is probably what we were thinking, like, okay, well, you know, there's 3 different things inside here, and what if one's better than the other? Well, it's the best fit approach, okay? So the topic is communicated accurately and effectively, okay? Identification and explanation of the research topic is effectively communicated. The purpose and focus of the research is clear and appropriate. So if you don't identify your research topic with your research question in here, you're going to get knocked down. The research question is clearly stated and focused. So this is what's really super important for you to look at that research question. If you think, and if I made comments to you that your research question is still not clearly stated and focused, that's a problem. If you altered your research question and you haven't had your supervisor take a look at it, or if you haven't had me take a look at it, that's a problem. You always don't want to move forward until you know that that RQ is solid, because you're getting some easy points just on that RQ. Then we have the methodology of the research is complete. An appropriate range of relevant sources and or method have been applied in relation to the topic and research question. There is evidence of effective and informed selection of sources and or methods. So let's look at what does that look like when we're looking at a paper in the introduction. Okay, now some of these descriptors, okay, they are moving into the entire paper, but a good bit of it is just in the introduction right here. So if we look at it, let's okay, so we're going to look at this paper. This one is for the language and literature course, and I selected this one for all of us to look at because I think that it's not so subject based that none of us can kind of understand what it's doing. So this one is the RQ is, to what extent do the confessions of public figures have the purpose of using language and structure to manipulate audience response? Okay, so that RQ could be a little bit better, but it's good for what our purposes are. So if we're looking at this introduction, and I'm going to show you where it's doing the things that it needs to do. So in today's popular culture, the making of confessional speeches by disgraced public figures is neither shocking nor commendable. Instead, it is expected. Following this new protocol, it is common for public figures to confess their guilt, apologize, and offer some justification. As a novel exercise in audience manipulation, it seems relevant to explore the importance of the language used and the primary objective of the exercise. Okay, so right there, what this candidate has done is they have built some contextualization, and then they have also discussed the worthiness of their topic. In that statement, it seems relevant to explore the importance of the language used and the primary objective of the exercise. The next paragraph. In this essay, the question, to what extent do the confessions of public figures have the purpose of using language and structure to manipulate audience response, is to be explored. You see right there how they have their research question bolded, and in the very beginning of the paper, that is important for you to also do. I even want you to break APA and bold that research question, okay? But it should be very clear and in the introduction. An effort will be made to discover the true and core intent of public confessions by looking at the confessional speeches of Bill Clinton, a former U.S. president, and Tiger Woods, a professional U.S. golfer. Media and literary theory will also be called upon. The effect the language used has on the audience will be investigated, both on an individual word level and holistically. This will be done through research and analysis, personal interpretation, and through the results of a word choosing exercise. So right there, we see their methodology. This is how they're going to go about doing their research and what they're going to look at. So for my literature people, you're going to be looking at your primary research, which is your text, and then you're going to be consulting with some scholarly works from people who have kind of examined critically your field. Maybe you're going to also look at theoretical works, but whatever subject area you're going into, it's important that you really say, like, what your methodology, how are you going to prove that? Okay, so now we've kind of seen that in the introduction, and if we wanted to go and see, okay, well, an examiner, what do they say? So we see right here on this, oops, wrong one. Ignore that. Ignore it again. Ignore that one. Okay, here it is. Here it is. Here it is. Right here. Okay, I'm not totally, even though I'm upset that I messed up my video, I'm not going to start again because I'm already 12 minutes in. Okay, so if we look at this one out of 6 points received a 6. The introduction offers a clear rationale for the exercise. The research question is clear and addressed at an original and intriguing area of research into a specific type of public address. The purpose and focus of the exercise are both confidently explained, and an interesting range of academic sources and methods has been employed. See further comments below. The essay satisfies all 3 strands at the 5-6 level of the achievement and merits the higher mark of the band. Now, if we were going back in to look at what they're talking about as far as like the research that they're exploring, which is really kind of more going into some of the other criterion that are assessed, but you can see right here, if we're looking in the main body of their paper, you can see that they're using their footnotes right here, and they're using some research to guide. And not only do we have primary research, but he's also integrating secondary research to consult with that. Okay, so if we wanted to look at something that is a little bit more literary, right? And I believe, I don't know, I taught Of Mice and Men, but I think all of you may have read Of Mice and Men. If not, you should. But we could still look at it even if we don't know the story. To what extent do the characters in Of Mice and Men portray the impossibility of the American dream, and how people have the ability to destroy their own dreams? Okay, so I read this one when I was at training, and I was just like, oh my gosh, this RQ is basic. That's what it is. I mean, this is the paper that everyone writes about this book over and over and over again. There's nothing intellectually stimulating about this RQ. But we're going to go in and we're going to look at what they have and see where they are scoring, again looking at criterion A, focus and method. So this essay went to investigate the role that the characters in the novella had to portray the main motifs of the novel Of Mice and Men. The 2 main motifs of investigation include the impossibility of the American dream and how people have the ability to destroy their own dreams. These are supported by the other motifs of prejudice, friendships, and the original hardships of farmers during the Great Depression. They reveal how the American dream during the Great Depression was impossible for the main characters George and Lenny to obtain. These ideas are relevant towards the research question. Again, here they are. They're bolding and they have their research question in the introduction of the paper. This research question is worthy of investigation because on a global aspect, the ideas such as prejudice, hardships endured by workers, and the importance of friendships can be relatable to everyday society in many different cultures. So that's basic, but again, they're talking about the worthiness. The scope of this investigation includes the actions that the characters have made towards the plot that affected their dreams, the discrimination against African Americans and women, how friendships last longer than dreams, and how the time period, the Great Depression, affected farmers everywhere across the nation, and that most people were forced to find new jobs to survive their conditions. So it's telling you the scope of what they're going to look at kind of within the text. To the great extent, the characters that are presented in the novella illuminate the idea of the impossibility of the American dream, and that people have the ability to destroy their own dreams through the onslaught of prejudices, discrimination, lack of self-understanding, and hardships presented by the economy. These ideas reveal how important friendships are in the midst of struggle, which that is unnecessary and superfluous to the argument, but it's in there. John Steinbeck creates an atmosphere of suspense and conflict between his characters in the novella of Mice and Men. His characters that are most impactful are George, Lenny, Crooks, Candy, and Curly's wife. To a large extent, the characters, their social standings, and their actions in Of Mice and Men portray the impossibility of the American dream, and that humans might have the tendency to destroy their own hopes. The main characters, George and Lenny, mostly convey this meaning. Their motives dictate the hope of obtaining the American dream, but their actions are what destroy it. Again, that paragraph right there is a little repetitive. We see a lot of kind of like the same things being said over and over again, but he's not done with his introduction. The significance of this topic is that it is relatable to the hardships that occurred to many migrant workers in the time of the Great Depression. It also illuminates the ongoing issues of prejudice and discrimination. Although Of Mice and Men reveals these negative aspects that are present in society, it discovers the importance of friendships and relationships. So now if we go and we look and see, okay, well, what did this one get? This one's a little bit different, and that's why I wanted to show you kind of two different introductions. So this one, instead of falling in this range, is falling in the bottom of the range. The research question is stated but not clearly expressed, and part of the discussion are not focused on the research question. So it's not building that context that's kind of pointed at the research question. Now, we do have the research question there, but it's just not clearly expressed. It's kind of basic, and it's just kind of going all over. The sources and methods used are limited in range given the topic and research question. Utilizing critical reading would have helped the candidate to focus on the topic more effectively, particularly in terms of exploring the implications of the American dream, rather than using it as a mere cliche. Overall, the candidate's level of achievement can be situated at the higher end of the lowest mark bands 1, 2. And so what I want you to see from that is just because you kind of do the things that are there doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to score in the top of the mark bands. You have to kind of do it resourcefully. You have to do it skillfully. When they're talking about the research that they're using, primarily the research that the person uses is only from the primary text. There's no kind of like contextualization about what the critics have said about Of Mice and Men, and because it's one of those well-worn texts, there is tons and tons and tons of criticism that student could have employed using to build that contextualization. If we look at another one, and actually we're not going to look at another one, so we're going to leave it at that. It's really important for you to go in and look at these criterion. I put this document in each of your folders. You can see that it also has like this advice to students. All of this comes from the IB, so it's not anything that I have made up. It's straight from them, from the guide, or from the OCC where we get teacher resources. You can see then that criterion B is your knowledge and understanding, and this is it to assess the extent to which the research relates to the subject area discipline used to explore the research question, or in the case of the world studies, the issues addressed in two disciplinary perspectives applied, and additionally the way in which this knowledge and understanding is demonstrated through the use of appropriate terminology and concepts. So if we go down here, knowledge and understanding is excellent. The selection of source materials is clearly relevant and appropriate to the research question. So this is where like you're going to get hit if you're using materials that are from like these places that are just like random. So if you're talking about like facts about a country, for instance, you shouldn't just be finding research from Anywheresville online. You should be going to a relevant source that is appropriate. Knowledge of the topic discipline issue is clear and coherent, and sources are used effectively and with understanding. So that's where, like, if you're just including research in there to include research in there and not really with a purpose, you're going to get hit on that. Use of terminology and concepts is good. The use of subject-specific terminology and concepts is accurate and consistent, demonstrating effective knowledge and understanding. So you need to use the language of your subject, which is very, very important. And this criterion is going to be all throughout your paper, as well as your critical thinking criterion. This is the criterion that packs the most bang for the buck. So if you don't really know anything about your topic, you're really going to suffer, because this criterion right here is worth 12 points. 12, if you think about that, that's 12 out of 28 points is just on your critical thinking. However, I don't want you to discount those other criterion, because I believe that the other criterion are roughly like, I could totally be wrong because I don't have a calculator in front of me, but 6 out of 28, so that's like what, 18%? So that's still like, a really good amount that you can get in those other areas, or that you could lose in those areas. It's going to bother me, so I'm going to calculate that percentage. Oh, no, it was like 22%, I think. Yeah, 22%. So it's really important that you kind of go in and that you look at this criteria. Then you go in and you see the research is excellent, the research is appropriate to the research question, and its application is consistently relevant. Analysis is excellent. So this is like how you're analyzing the sources that you're using and how you're going to prove your research question. Again, if you're going, remember, it's an argument, so you have to be always going to your argument. If you are just like reporting facts, then you're not providing any analysis, and you are going to get hit right here. Discussion evaluation is excellent. So remember, like, if they've separated these, there's a difference then between analysis, then there's a difference between discussion and evaluation. This reason argument is well structured and coherent. Any minor inconsistencies do not hinder the strength of the overall argument or the final or summative conclusion. Finally, then you have a criterion for your presentation, and this kind of goes over what structure and layout is. The structure of the essay is clearly appropriate in terms of expected convention of the topic. The argument and the subject of the essay is registered. Layout considerations are present. The structure and layout support of the reading, understanding, evaluation. So this is going in there and it's looking at like, are you following? Is your essay double-spaced? 12-point Arial font is what they are calling for. Are the title and research question mentioned on the cover page? Are all of your pages numbered? Have you prepared a correct table of contents? Some of you have abstracts. You write the abstract at the end anyways, but we're not going to need an abstract anymore because they deleted that from the requirements of the extended essay. So you can just delete that abstract. we're not going to be doing that anymore. So you can kind of go through this, and then finally the engagement, and this is just strictly on your RPPFs. So don't worry about criterion E, you just have to worry about A, B, C, and D. I really need you guys to have this rubric right by you as you're going through. Make sure that you're doing these things. Go in ManageBox. Okay, I'm going to close this up and open ManageBox up. Okay, so go into ManageBox, and of course mine looks a little bit different, but go to the files and extended essay, and I don't have the examples in there yet, but you can see right here under examples, and I'm going to put some examples inside these folders for you. Okay, so make sure that you go in there and that you do in fact reevaluate and look at some examples. I'll have some graded examples for you in there so that you can kind of see what it is that you need to do. All right, if you have questions, I will be on campus Thursday, and I am going to have some time next week. I just don't know exactly what day that it's going to be, so I'll continually post that on ManageBox. I will be checking on the 30th to see what you guys have turned in. If you've already turned something in and you want to change it, please do go in and change it. If not, make sure that you change it in the end. You're going to kind of have to go back and look at the rubric. All right. I am here if you need me, so shoot me an email and we'll make it happen. Have a good one. Sorry the video is so long.